Friday, 28th of November 2025. The origin of man. From a scientist's perspective, the issue of the origin of man represents the very basis of anthropology, paleontology, and genetics. Nowadays, the most widely accepted explanation is based on evolutionary theory, fossil evidence, and genetic data. Anthropological and fossil evidence. Anthropologists have long debated the origins of humanity, but most agree that modern humans, Homo sapiens, descended from earlier hominins in Africa. The fossil record reveals that anatomically modern humans first appeared in Africa approximately 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, with the earliest fossils found at sites such as Omo Kibish, Ethiopia. These finds make Africa the cradle for our species, and further remains demonstrate a slow migration into Eurasia and beyond, proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Science. Although the fossil record is incomplete, major transitions are clear. Early bipedal apes gave way to various hominins such as Australopithecus, Homo habilis, and eventually Homo erectus, who left Africa to give rise to other archaic humans that included Neanderthals. Genetic findings. Genetic evidence strongly supports the recent African origin model, more commonly referred to as out of Africa. Mitochondrial DNA studies, Y chromosome data, and whole genome sequencing show that genetic diversity among Africans is the highest. Thus, this continent had to spend more time in evolution prior to its migration and partial replacement of local archaic humans elsewhere. There was some interbreeding with archaic groups, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, in Eurasia, but most studies indicate a primary origin in Africa and more recent divergence among non-African populations, human biology. Key points from peer-reviewed research. Fossils date the origin of modern humans in Africa back to around 200,000 to 300,000 years, proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The evolutionary changes were gradual in nature, with many transitional species, such as Australopithecus and Homo habilis. Meanwhile, Homo erectus migrated from Africa to Eurasia. Genetic evidence supports the recent African origin, with the non-African populations arising from a far more recent migration and with interbreeding between them and archaic populations. Nature, Genome Research. Taken together, the fossil and genetic data have mostly replaced models such as polygenism or separate origins, with one continuous story that centers on Africa. Essays on cultural transmission. The origin of man is best understood in summary as a long evolutionary process, primarily rooted in Africa, as illuminated by fossils and genetics. Although this synthesis is constantly being refined by new finds, it remains the consensus view across modern scientific disciplines. The scientific theory of human origins, all modern humans sharing a common ancestry in Africa, does not explain why racism started. Rather, the science undercuts the thinking behind racism because it demonstrates that all humans are fundamentally very closely related. The roots of racism are not scientific, but social racism. Prejudice or discrimination based on perceived racial differences existed long before modern evolutionary theory or the findings of anthropology and genetics. Its origins are rooted in social, historical, and economic forces, not in science. Some of the main reasons racism developed: colonialism and slavery. The colonial expansion of Europeans from the 15th century onward was all about conquering and putting other peoples in a state of subordination. In their justification, colonizers came up with pseudo-scientific ideas about these so-called racial hierarchies, claims that some groups were inherently superior or inferior. These ideas were not based on real science. Early theories of human variation. Before Darwin and the rise of evolutionary theory, most thinkers, primarily based in Europe, advanced the view that humans could be divided into biologically distinct races, often ranked hierarchically. This model of polygenism falsely posited that the different races had separate origins. These kinds of ideas rationalized inequality and colonial domination. Essays on cultural transmission. Science abuse. Some scientists and other writers in the 19th and early 20th centuries misused or even fabricated scientific claims to substantiate racist beliefs, such as in phrenology and craniometry. Modern genetics and anthropology thoroughly refute these abuses. What modern science shows: anthropology and genetics of today prove that the categories we call race are not deeply rooted in biology. All living humans are over 99.9% genetically identical. Most genetic diversity is within any given population, rather than between groups. Skin color or hair type is a tiny adaptation to the local environment, not one of fundamental difference. Does evolutionary theory cause or justify racism? No, the evolutionary model demonstrates the contrary. All humans share recent common ancestors. Ironically enough, racist ideologies at times distorted the scientific language for their purposes. But in reality, the real findings of anthropology and genetics weaken the concept of racial divisions. Summary: racism stems from history, power, and cultural mythology, not from a scientific study of human origins. If anything, the science should be a powerful argument against racism because it shows just how much we have in common and just how artificial such divisions are. Carl Jung's legacy, influence, and controversy. Carl Jung, 1875 to 1961, was a Swiss psychiatrist, best known as the founder of analytical psychology. He introduced influential ideas like the collective unconscious, archetypes and personality types, introvert, extrovert, etc. His work has shaped not just psychology, but also art, literature, and popular culture. But Jung's legacy also includes some disturbing views on race and primitive cultures. He often used the language and presuppositions of his time, relating theories about the supposed variations between races or civilizations, and placing Western, particularly European culture, at the summit. Much of this mirrored the general views held by many European academics during the early 1900s, an era in which scientific racism was appallingly common. Some of Jung's writings did contain descriptions of racial unconscious or racial memory, which today are known to be incorrect, and in some contexts, deeply racist or exclusionary. At times, he also made negative comments about ethnic groups, sometimes in ways that played into broader prejudices. Why is he still quoted or taught? A few reasons. Foundational impact. Jung's main concepts, such as archetypes, individuation, and shadow, remain foundational in psychology, therapy, film, literature, and spiritual studies. Most modern fields, while rejecting his race-based ideas, still find value in his broader insights into the human mind. Separating ideas. Many scholars, therapists, or writers invoke Jung's psychological theories while clearly rejecting or criticizing his views on race. In general, people attempt to separate his valuable ideas from the misguided or hurtful ones. Critical engagement. Continued discussion of Jung provides an opportunity for studying not only his insights, but also his blind spots and biases. Many analyses today call out the problem elements of his work, using him as a case study in how even influential thinkers can reflect and reinforce the prejudices of their time. Should we still quote him? Treating his most troubling views as integral to the meaning of his work, rather than glossing over or ignoring them, is increasingly common in academia. Lively debate continues over whether to cite him, with clear caveats, or not at all if his ideas reinforce noxious myths. Bottom line, Jung is quoted because his ideas are influential and still spark lively debate, but his problematic legacy now tends to be much more frankly acknowledged. To quote him responsibly means not taking his words as gospel truth and being always forthcoming about which of his ideas, especially on race, are out of date or destructive.